I'm Jenelle Etzel. Welcome to the Joypunk podcast. My guest, Lindsey Murphy, is a web television show host, public speaker, science communicator, marketing and business development geek, crowdfunding wizard, and founder. She is the creator and host of the Fab Lab with Crazy Aunt Lindsey, co-host of TEDx Portland. She's a Gemini, a Jersey girl, and a friend to as many as possible. Welcome, Lindsey.
Woo! Hi.
Lindsey was a lunch speaker at my women's group, Mary's group. After lunch was over, we sat for another few hours talking. And I remember thinking to myself, it's like one of those, you have like those thoughts that stick with you forever. It was like the bell goes off the gong. But I remember thinking, how can I spend the rest of my life getting to connect and have conversations with amazing people like this? I was so inspired. So in a roundabout way, I think you inspired me to do this podcast as one of the ways that I'm living my dream. So thank you.
I love it. Thank you for telling me that.
I also, as we were prepping to get ready for this, I have a list of questions, but I thought I pulled up my iPad, look at my notes, and I typed in Lindsey's name, and I have notes from that lunch in 2019.
Wow.
And I have the first quote that I wrote down was, "Am I praying or worrying in God's direction?"
Mm-hmm.
That's so beautiful. Do you remember saying that? And can you talk a little bit about that?
I think, am I praying or worrying in God's direction? Like, I grew up in a house that went to church. Mm-hmm. And, prayer is something that comes up a lot. One of the things that I remember hearing from the different churches that I spent time in is that people don't know how to pray. And I always thought that that was so weird. But then, I remember hearing different pastors talk about what prayer is. If you're Catholic, it's, saying a set verse or so. And
ritual.
Yeah, it's right. And, if you go to a Pentecostal place, it's, the hands and the hooping and and there are all of these different expressions of prayer. And as someone who has spent her life meditating on the concept of praying without ceasing, which is a scripture, to pray without, it's more than a scripture, it's a command. And someone who has tried to activate in that, but then also someone who spent a lot of time living with anxiety and depression and paranoia. And a lot of times what I thought were prayers were me in these thought loops of, oh, please don't let this happen. Oh my gosh, what if this, and going on these crazy thought
the thought
adventures, right?
Yeah.
Thought trains of doom and right. And then ending it with oh God, don't let that happen. And convincing myself that that is a prayer when I realized that prayer was something else. It wasn't, it was something that interrupted those anxiety thoughts. It was something that interrupted the worst case scenario and painted a different picture that you could believe in, as someone who spent a lot of time thinking about faith and living her life to experience the exercise of faith and trying to figure out what it really was, really figuring out what it meant to believe in something, what faith was, what it was versus knowing, or what does wisdom look like? Just all of these different concepts that I think we hear about in sacred and religious places. And some of us think about them and some of us don't. But as someone who thought really deeply about them, what faith really meant, because, in the definition that I felt like I had been given, faith or believing in God required me to suspend reason and logic in order to believe. And that just wasn't a version of God that I could ride with. So spending my life trying to figure out what faith looked like. And so for me, bringing in that whole idea of praying without ceasing and then acknowledging my anxiety and my depression and what the mind does with those things, and then trying to figure out what prayer looked like.
Yeah.
It's the thing that interrupts these doom thoughts and puts my heart towards something that I don't want or I'm desperate to not have happen, but towards something that will and can.
It's really beautiful. There's so much to unpack there. You had said towards the end, living beyond reason or reasons. And I find I use that word a lot in that to create anything really great, you kind of have to live an unreasonable life.
Girl,
right?
I think that's how you and I first really connected, where it was just you kind of have to throw it to the wind.
Yeah. Because there are always, the thing that, people can find so much evidence for whatever worldview they have.
Girl.
Oh, tell me all your reasons.
Yes.
Tell me the reasons this won't work. Tell me the reasons that this is the way it always is. Reasons. And you get those out of the way. Mm-hmm. And then you're just in a field of possibility. But that's scary. Because one, you have to be willing to be like, wow, I was completely wrong. And sometimes it feels safer to be right, even when that right is keeping you in a miserable and dark space. But it's safe because you know where it is. So, and what you were saying too, I was also thinking about what we do to interrupt, and some people call it, some people may call it prayer. That's meditation. I think you think of these people that, I don't know if they consider a spiritual practice, but even making like a vision board or manifesting, like anywhere you want to go, you're going to have to start putting aside your reasons.
And what makes sense and what's right in front of you. And
and thinking bigger. So you are someone that's absolutely lived an unreasonable life. I know. Just the fact that you're here today in Portland, because I know part of your story is that you moved to Oregon, clear across the U.S. You didn't really even know where Portland was.
I had no clue. I literally, my friend said she was in Portland, and I literally bought a train ticket to Maine.
Yeah.
Portland, Maine.
Yeah. And I know you came over as well with 47 cents in your bank account.
Yeah, I gave talks about that for 2 years at different churches. I have slides.
Just faith?
I have literal screenshots of my actual bank account with 0.47. I'm not joking, in a backpack.
So what conviction, what were you following when you made that decision?
I mean, there was a lot. I mean, to put it really simply, it really was God. It was a spiritual direction. And I talk about this in Christian communities, and they're like, oh yeah, I totally get it. Outside of Christian communities, they're like, this bitch is crazy. I'm like, both are correct.
Yeah.
Yes. But it was and I was just going through the other day this series of giant office boxes. I have these journals from these very specific times of my life, and a couple of things were happening at that time. I had spent my life, I grew up in a Christian community, and then when I was really young, I was like, this shit is bullshit. But I was really interested in religion, and so I took an academic posture to religious studies for years. And I had friends who had professors for parents, and so we would talk about philosophy and blah, blah, blah. So I ended up accidentally studying theology in college as an atheist agnostic. Fast forward to 2011, and my life is basically going to shambles. And I have this experience in this church this day, and it literally felt like I was hearing, being given directions by God. Mm-hmm. And I know that it sounds insane. But doing little things this door is going to be open. This is and just seeing it. I don't even know how to describe it. But that year I felt in my spirit, move west. Mm-hmm. It was like a directive. And I'm living my New York City life. I'm babysitting. I'm doing all of this stuff. And I'm thinking New York is it. This is all that there is. There's nothing else. There's no reason to go anywhere else. I'm the 7th generation to be raised in the house that I grew up in New Jersey. There's no reason to go anywhere. And my life went to complete shambles. Moved home to my family's house in New Jersey in 2012, and started dating this guy from my childhood. We thought we were going to get married, and instead of getting engaged, we break up. And I'm in bed for 2 weeks. And I get on my knees this one day, and I'm like, God, what the fuck?
That's how my prayers usually start.
Straight up like that. Straight like that. What the fuck, God? I believe in you. I'm going to church all the time. This shit doesn't make any sense. I don't have a job. I've been celibate this whole time. And all I want to do is, I'm doing all the things that I think are going to, please you. And my life is in shit. And I just broke up with this guy that I've known since I was in 4th grade. And what am I going to do? And I literally heard God say, I told you to move west. I cannot bless you here. I literally heard in my mind,
chills,
in my ears, but not from the outside in, from the inside out. And I literally said, you're going to have to tell me where that is and make the money show up because I don't have anything. And within 6 weeks, I had a job to do copywriting for this website that was the exact amount that I calculated needing to move to Seattle, because I wrote down in my journal, the first thing that I wrote down was Portland. And Portland was the first thing that I wrote down. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make absolutely any sense. I don't know anybody there. I don't know what's there. And I convinced myself it was Seattle because I had worked on this project with Xbox. And this one night I had taken this babysitting job and I went to go buy my plane ticket. I typed in NYC to SEA. And instead of those tickets coming up, instead it was NYC to PDX. And the ticket was $121. I had never seen a ticket before or after or since that was that cheap going to Portland.
Yeah.
And when I saw that number 121, I knew it was the ticket I was supposed to buy. I just bought the ticket and I texted my girlfriend who I had known in high school, who I visited in 2009. The one time I'd been to Portland, I visited her in 2009. And I was here for 4 days. And I was like, I'm coming to Portland and I have no idea what I'm going to do. And she's like, well, I just moved into a house and the rent is $325 for a room.
Just the rent you're quoting gives me the exact year. Oh, I got a whimsical for a second.
Girl. And then, it's a much longer story. When I got here, the first church that I went to, I ended up getting introduced to this guy who I'd been introduced to 2 years earlier in some email from a mentor. All of these crazy things just came together. And I believe me, as someone who has spent 5 years in ministry, someone who spent time, at, Princeton Seminary as an atheist, who has grappled with regardless of what you believe, I look at my life here in Portland and I'm like, I know that whatever told me to move here in Portland, I know that it was the thing that had my highest good in its plan. And I trust that thing completely.
There are a lot of people who've lost a lot of faith in Portland.
Oh, yeah.
This past couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
People that were the biggest fans and loved it. This is the place. Who are now, I don't want anything to do with it. I'm leaving. I'm giving up. What is your thought about that?
I have a lot of thoughts. I think people that are feeling that have every right to feel that. When you just use your eyes, when you just use your eyes, it's really easy to believe it.
Do you still feel called to be here?
I think Portland is my home. It's interesting. I think that there are, missions and there are assignments and there are tasks. There are things that sometimes you are appointed and sometimes that assignment is complete. And what you do after that assignment is your choice until you are assigned another thing. And I feel like I was here in Portland for a reason. I think there were some really specific things that I was meant to do for myself, like healing, growing up, starting my business, the relationships that I have here. I was supposed to be here for a very specific reason that felt like me bumping around in the dark sometimes, trying to figure out what it was. But I feel like it almost feels like I'm between assignments right now. I did the work and now I'm enjoying what the work was. you don't always have to till the ground. Sometimes you're just harvesting. Sometimes you're just canning.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're resting. And then sometimes you have to activate into a different activity for a new season. And it just feels like I'm in that liminal space. Like, I feel like I'm in that liminal space now. I think COVID was that liminal space for a lot of people. And that's how I feel. Like, Portland before and Portland now are different places.
Yeah.
And I know I love here. I know, but I also know that I'm a different person. I want to be in a house now, and I have a dog, and I want a car. Like, that wasn't me 2 years ago. That wasn't me 3 years ago. 2019, wow. Like, I remember her, and a lot was new for her and changing. And who I am now feels like a really different person. Portland is my home, but I'm also ready to know what the next assignment is. And if it's here, amazing. But I think I'll be here for a while. No one's getting rid of me.
Let's talk a little bit about your work. You were brought here for what?
Do you mean Portland?
Yeah.
When I got here, I didn't know what was going to be here. I mean, my life in New York, I started working at MTV Networks. That was my first job out of community college. And then I ended up in advertising. And then I was a babysitter. And then I started a kids show that I was consulting. Like, I did a bunch of stuff that was all around like new business and media and that whole thing. So when I got here to Portland, I was jobless. I didn't know what was going to happen. I started working at this little interactive company while literally like in ministry. I was like full-time volunteering at a very large church here and, running the Serve ministry, which had me all over the city. Prayer ministry, like I was doing a Live, Love, Christmas, like I was doing all of these big things for this church and like for like the first year. And then an old friend or like a colleague from Adidas knew that I was here and was like, do you want to come, do digital strategy, for like Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez? And I'm like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. So I just sort of like, I came here and I was asked to do things and I just said yes. And it was probably about 5 years until I said yes to myself, like said yes to the thing that I really wanted to do, which was this, cute little kids science show that I'd been secretly doing since 2010,
Yeah.
So what I came here to do in Portland, I think, was to discover and bet on myself. So what I came here to do, I literally just came here. I didn't know what was here. I didn't know that Nike was here. I didn't know that Wieden & Kennedy was here. I didn't know that any of the places that were giant stones on my path to self-discovery, I didn't know that they were here. But I think I was here to discover myself, and my profession was just one of the areas that helped me.
Yeah, you mentioned Nike, Wieden & Kennedy. These are all companies that you worked for, did projects with. And in betting on yourself, it takes me back to, I was at the coast working down at our beach office, and we were trying to figure out, was like, the first few weeks of COVID, where it was actually like we were all getting the news, like all the plans we thought might still happen, like nothing was happening. Like it was starting to get really real that this was shut down. We were waiting. I know on the real estate side, we were waiting to see if the governor would say whether we were an essential service or not. Like, are we going to continue? And we had this beautiful conversation, and I'm sitting in the windows with the coast light on my face, and you told me fear is a choice.
Yeah.
And you had just been told that like your production studios where you would be launching digital daycare shut down.
God. Oh,
you
yeah.
had no home for digital
God.
daycare. And you were like, so you guys have some vacant houses or what? where can
oh my
help
gosh,
me?
Yes.
Oh my God. And, ironically, we had just built our headquarters. I was so excited to move
we are sitting
in.
right now.
We're here, have a party. We had painted a bright rainbow mural on the wall. We have this colorful kitchen. And the minute you said that, I was like, I didn't know it, but I think I just built the set for a children's science show. Because it seems more suited to that than anything, actually. And so you guys set up, and and filmed here. And
yeah, for 6 weeks, man.
Yeah.
With like, we had like, I don't think you knew this, but we had like comforters and like pillows, and we were like sleeping on the ground because we didn't know. We thought it was going to be like martial law and you couldn't go across the bridges. Like, we had no idea what was happening. There was an international lockdown, you know, and me and my team, we had been working for weeks to get ready to shoot the 5th season of the show, which we had successfully crowdfunded for the year earlier. And I was just like, there's no way I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm not doing this. And we have to do this. I feel crazy. I'm going to use my iPhone and we're going to just make a live show every day. And if you're in, great. And literally all of them, except one person, was like, we will move into the studio and we will do this with you.
I know that was the other thing too. You had to take your crew with you. Yeah. You can't see anybody else. We don't know what kind of risk we're putting each other at. Just being together.
We were isolated here. We just decided to basically like professionally pod, you know. And Wednesday we'd go to the grocery store. 3 of us would go. It was crazy.
I remember in 2019, meeting you and being like, this is the Fred Rogers that the world has been waiting for. And I say that with like so much love in my heart. I just watched for the first time his documentary a couple weeks ago. I probably cried 40 times, but I thought of you a lot because I hadn't realized that his story is a lot like yours in that it's a ministry.
You're going to make me cry right now.
Yeah. Well, it's just this commitment to being with children, seeing children, including them in the story of all of our story and how often they're left out. And it reminded me of how beautiful it was in those first few days when the Fab Lab was here and you guys were recording and I would come in and you were teaching kids how to wash their hands because the adults in their life, we don't know where they're at. They're scared. And they're hearing all these messages, and the kids just need someone to keep it simple and teach them to do and talk to them and respect them like the beautiful sentient beings that they are. They're here. Yeah. They're awake. They're here. And I think that was what so moved me about Mr. Rogers is that he was acknowledging the complexity of the emotions of children. And I had a lot of those experiences with my own kids. And when we were homeschooling, I started doing nonviolent communication with them. So
that's a big lift. Good for you.
I'll give them the sheets. They'd roll their eyes. Oh, Mom. I made them meditate too. I mean, they wanted to go back to school so bad. But I gave them the sheets with the needs and the feelings and the complexity and of their emotions that they were feeling blew me away. I'm struggling. I don't have a sense of purpose. I'm not contributing. Those are big words for, a 10 and 11-year-old.
Yeah.
And so I just want to thank you, one, for doing that. And two, if you can share with us a little bit about like what was your calling as you went in, as you knew like, okay, these kids are all of a sudden home now all the time. And you guys were willing to do that. Like you had a calling, you knew you were needed. We will do round the clock digital daycare. And
it really was around the clock. And just, none of us knew what we were doing. Like we were literally like, I think we had 8 iPhones and an iPad and using some like switcher app that none of us had never heard of or used. Like we really, shout out to Marceau and Brianna and Waleed and Preston and just like the entire team of, I can't remember the young man's name, but he had to go back to Hawaii, which is why he wasn't physically here. But like, I just knew that some shit was about to go down. So I was a babysitter later in my life. I was an adult and, I went from being in a corporate setting, working with these adults to working in their home with their children. So I think from like 2008 to 2010 gave me this like perspective as a non-parent, because I'm not a parent, right? Yeah. But as this non-parent who has supported people at work and supported them in their home, and then looking at how COVID really stopped everything. Like it wasn't even like a lurch halt.
Yeah.
it was just like it was just done, you know?
Yeah.
And remembering, wow, Lindsey saved the day. I had this event to go to that my husband didn't tell me about, and his boss is going to be there, and all these things that matter to people, and like the things that seem trite and seem like small things, but realizing everyone is going through their own stuff right now. Mm-hmm. And as someone who doesn't have kids, being able to hold space for people who have kids and have a life for a few hours a day, I can step into that space of giving you some time. You know your kids are going to be safe. You know that they're going to be taken care of, so you can figure some shit out. Yeah. Be it take a shower or get ready for a gala or have that meeting that you have to have, or you're not going to be able to make the mortgages or whatever it is. And when COVID came, I was already planning on doing my show, which I was very excited to do, but I was also looking at every event that I was supposed to go to for like 3 months stopped suddenly. Every school, every business that I worked with, every friend that I had, like not even scrambling, because like scrambling suggests that you like at least have some direction. School is closed. There is no such thing as a babysitter. My work is closed. And I just knew in my heart that it wasn't going to be 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I knew it was going to be the shift of the millennium. Like I just knew that this was, and I just felt almost like, here's my moment to shine. Like I can step into this space for these parents and provide them as best I can. Because we were all flexing into some weird shit, like YouTube wasn't working right. The internet was crazy. Like nothing, the conspiracies were everywhere. Like all kinds of things were happening. And I just knew that I needed to be that one person that parents could count on. I remember when I was a babysitter, I loved being the one person that people could count on. Because the teenagers were off being whatever, or the grandma didn't want to drive at night, or whatever it is. Like, I can call Lindsey and I know that she'll be there. I can trust her to be there. And it just felt like that moment. It was just like that. I have to be there for these families because shit is real fucked up and it's going down right now. And I can fill in that space for a few hours.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate, I remember seeing the Fred Rogers documentary, and it was right as I was trying to figure out what it is that I do about my life at church, because I had spent so much time at church and I was, pulled in 1,000 different directions, and I had just started not even just started my business, but I got really serious about my business and, had an LLC and I had a bookkeeper and all this stuff. And I remember not being able to feeling like I can't do both. Like I can't have a full-time job and serve at church the way that I do, which is full-time work without payment, and see to this thing that I know that I'm called to, and is the thing that I know can be a business that sustains me and my family and grows. I can't do all of it. What do I do? Because I'm in ministry here, what do I do next? And I remember watching that documentary at that theater on Northwest 21st, that old theater, and being so struck. And I call it the Fred Rogers ministry. I realized what my ministry was, what I was continuing. And it is directly connected to this Fred Rogers energy.
You had talked a little bit about that right now it feels like a transition phase. That you grew up here in Portland. You were called here to do some growing up, to believe in yourself, bet on yourself, follow this passion and this dream that you had. And holy cow, what you created. It is so impressive, so inspiring. And we were talking on the phone the other day, and I feel like a winter time is my time to have these just before spring starts. We always have some sort of really amazing, heart-opening conversation. And a few years ago, it was about the concept of in bulk. You were sharing with me about, the point in which we actually contain the most energy within us is right before we blossom or
Yes.
bloom. I mean, it's when it's in the dead of the winter. It's that gathering all of that down winter time. And then you're kind of harnessing that rest for the big explosion into spring, this in bulk. And this year we were talking a little bit about, growing up and us both, I think both being past kind of our maiden phase. Mm-hmm. And how you get a lot longer these days.
Yeah.
I feel like, and what a blessing to be maidens for longer.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that for my children,
Yes.
for my girls. But tell me a little bit about what that means for you.
Yeah. So there's this concept of the triple goddess. Essentially, it's the concept that like the Holy Spirit or the Holy Trinity was sort of borrowed from or plagiarized from. Mm-hmm. The Holy Spirit or the Holy Trinity has this like male connotation. But before, religions and spiritualists were in this sort of like masculine concept of God. There was this understanding that God had to be female because life comes from the feminine. Mm-hmm. It comes from the womb. It comes from the darkness, right? So the triple goddess is this ancient concept. And it's, a version of the Holy Trinity. It's the maiden, mother, and the crone. It's the 3 stages of life, the 3 stages of a seed's life, the 3 stages of a woman, the 3 stages of the moon, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so the maiden is a girl, basically a young girl that is just full of brazen potential and limitlessness, and she's kind of scattered and trying things, but she's just sort of like relishing in her energy and her youth and just the possibility of potential. She's young. She's innocent and naive and hopeful, but then she gets older and she becomes a mother. And the mother is seated in her full power, right? She's concentrating all of her energy, all of her focus on this clear purpose and intention, which is to nurture and nourish and protect and grow and care for. Just divine power. And then the mother, as she's going through her life, she graduates into the crone or to the elder, where, she achieves this level of wisdom and awareness that can only come with time. Mm-hmm. And then the grandmother passes on what she has to the granddaughter, who is the maiden, who then becomes the mother, who then becomes the crone, and then the cycle of life just continues. And so if you look at the images of those 3 things, the maiden is this, slender, feminine, girlish figure, and then the mother is this, beautiful, voluptuous hair, round, pregnant belly, and then the crone is this sort of like slightly crouched older woman. The new moon, the half moon, and the full moon going back to its newness. So when we were talking about the maiden, mother, and crone, it was at a time in my life where I was reflecting on, I think it was right around the time that I had sort of declared to my sister that I was ready to grow up. I was 36 years old and I'm ready to grow up, kind of being the black sheep in the family and being the one who didn't, get married. I'm the first one in my family to not have kids by 16, to be pregnant by 16. And just bouncing around, I'm the 7th generation to be raised in the house that I grew up in. And everyone stayed very close to the house. And I was the one at, 15 was going to school in New York, and at 19 was working in New York, and in my late 20s moved across the country to Oregon because I felt like God told me to,
Yeah.
And I had this really long relationship to my girlhood that I did not observe in my family, and I didn't observe very much in my community. And it was something I didn't even realize I was fighting for. When I think about my ancestors, when I think about my mom, my story as a Black, Indigenous, whatever you want to call person, like the women I come from had to grow up fast.
Yeah.
They had to grow up fast. They didn't, they didn't get to make the choice of graduating into motherhood. They were born into this posture, both in their homes and in their work.
Yeah.
All of the women I come from were maids and nannies, taking care of people's entire houses and then coming home and taking care of their own or doing their best to do that. So, for me, I really desired to hang on to my innocence. And when I think about the Fab Lab with Crazy Aunt Lindsey, when I think about, the sort of shift my life took in the late aughts that led me to the Fab Lab with Crazy Aunt Lindsey, where I got to discover how great I was with kids, babysitting. Just all I was doing was trying to make ends meet. And I discovered this entire chapter of life that would not hold itself back.
Yeah.
And what I brought to my time as a childcare provider was my child self, the version of myself that felt underdeveloped or ignored as a kid. I allowed myself to relish in that and share it with the kids who were in my life. Mm-hmm. And it just so happened to be at an intersection of time where the internet was really becoming a thing and YouTube was becoming up and all this stuff. And I happened to have the personality and the energy to figure out how to share it with as many kids as possible. Like, my goal was to scale joy. My goal was to scale curiosity and that feeling that it's okay to not know the answers. Mm-hmm. And to have fun figuring it out. Whereas when I was a kid, I was ostracized for not knowing the answer. I was ostracized for not having the same comprehension capacities as kids in my class. I was ostracized for those things. And I think for me, it created a person who was afraid to make mistakes. But life is about not just making mistakes, but moving through them.
Yeah.
And then integrating what you learned and enjoying the results of what you figured out.
Because then you are one hell of a mother and a crone. You've got some life to share. I'm a very visual thinker, and when you were talking about how the moon cycle is actually a reflection of like our bodies as women in that cycle, I just got felt a spiritual calling to just to protect that is allowed to happen. You get to have all the time you need to get to this point where you are ready to nourish another human being or others or relationship, whatever that looks like, whatever that is. And it's having these longer mating times. And I think that's why when I'm reading books and, the deep grief and sorrow when I hear about 13-year-olds getting married off. Yes. And it's there's just too much to do and learn and see before.
My great-grandmother was brought down off of Ramapo Mountain, the reservation in New Jersey, at 12 to avoid being made a child bride. And she was married the next year at 13. And I think it's especially important for this generation. I think about me as an elder millennial. Yeah. I love that term. Yeah. But as an elder, whatever her name, she's this comedian. I can't remember her name. She's hilarious. But I'm totally an elder millennial. But I think about what I experienced and what I think this time calls for. Because this is another thing. We are all results of the great standardization of humanity. Mm-hmm. We are all results of parents who came from post-World War II and suburbs and subdivisions and public school. Before World War II, we were in rural places, on farms, in our own little pods. Yeah. In our own little, with miles and miles. And then cities became a thing here in this country. And then city mentalities and culture mixing and all this stuff. But before that, there was no standard. Reading literacy as a standard is a new technology that is 2 generations old. So when I think about what we are all here to do, racism is a thing that we're no longer gaslighting ourselves about. Sexism is a thing that we're lurching out of gaslighting ourselves about as a collective. The realities of what's happening with the different types of trafficking and the different realities that have sustained economies in societies for a long time, things that we just weren't looking at or willing to be honest with ourselves about. And it's so hard because everything is crumbling around us because what's been existing for a long time has revealed itself. Yeah. And it's really hard to hear those things and see them, especially when we've been moving so fast for so long and able to ignore them and pretend that they're not there. Some of us genuinely didn't know that they were there.
Yeah.
Genuinely did not know that they were there in our family, in ourselves, in the society and community around us. So everything is fucked up. But what this time, what COVID did and what we are all collectively experiencing, whether we like it or not, is a great time of healing and making the decision to heal. Because you can totally walk on a broken leg. You can walk on a broken leg. You can throw a ball with an abscess forming. You can choose to ignore those things. Or you can go through the hard work of identifying them, rinsing them, snapping them back into place. And those things don't feel good either. And we're all going through our own version of, am I ready to heal? Do I have the tools to heal? Because the tools that I was told for healing, they look like witchcraft. Yeah. They look like, challenging my idea of what a masculine is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Healing looks really weird when I'm used to ignoring those things and maybe just going to church or just reading that Deepak Chopra devotional or whatever it is. Going deep to right what is wrong in the world, the things that are making me feel faithless and hopeless or disconnected. I personally think that I inadvertently or subconsciously chose my maidenhood so that I could heal and so that I could raise a different child, not raise my child with the same pain and the same ignorance and the same old gaslighting techniques that suggest success but don't yield it. I needed the time and the space to unbelieve the fairy tale and receive the vision of faith. So I think that it's important for us to protect those in ourselves. Every male, female, non-binary, that inner child. You can call it whatever. You can call it maiden phase. You can call it the sun phase, whatever. You can call it whatever you want. But we are all just little children in giant adult bodies that are trying to make sense of the world.
This being able, fighting for maidenhood. And thank you. Also, the acknowledgement of your family and generations of your family that didn't get that choice. How many people have not gotten that choice? The way that you put that also kind of reinforces my commitment and my fight to make sure that girls have a choice to when they get to enter into motherhood on all sorts of different levels.
On every level.
Keeping our girls safe. Just keeping them from violence so they don't have to face some of the harsher realities of life in that way. Letting them be able to have control over their reproductive rights. Spiritually, it is work. And I've tried to tell my girls this all the time is I want you to feel ready, as they, we were talking about sexual activity and becoming sexual beings, and give yourself the time. There is no hurry.
There's no hurry.
But unfortunately, so few girls get to have that luxury of time.
It's really, And because when I was a girl, no one insisted on the protection of that girlhood, that innocence, that choice, I became protective of it. I became my mother in some ways. In some ways, I became my dad. I talk, other interviews I've done, I talk so much about my dad and the 3 rules, that he had. And I call them the 3 accidental rules of Charles Murphy's feminism, because my dad was definitely not a feminist. He was a man from the South, he had Southern ideals of what a woman was. But the 3 rules that he gave me were don't get pregnant, go to college. And when I die, I'm the last man that you can count on for money without owing him something. So make your own money. And when I put those three things together and people are like, Lindsey, why aren't you married? I'm like, well, because I have choices.
Yes. Yes. I think that's why I love knowing you. I love being your friend. It reminds me of Robin Wall Kimmerer, the Braiding Sweetgrass. And
you were the third person to bring this book up. I think somebody sent it to me recently. Is this like a Native American book?
Okay. It is. And it's ministry. It's beautiful. But she opens the book saying we can all label the ways that we're broken, like you were saying. We can all have a story about how we're not good for the world, that we're not good for the environment. And she'll ask that to her classroom. She teaches environmental studies. She'll ask that to her classroom, and everyone can, tell me how we're not good for the world. Now tell me a story of how we are. Mm-hmm. And I think we're in a time of starting to discover the story of how we are.
Yes.
How we can be. And that's what I love about the work that you're doing with the Fab Lab for kids. You're giving them a story to live in, a narrative they haven't seen before. A Black woman doing science. Is that something every little kid got to see? No little kid got to see that when I was growing up. And your storytelling and your connection to your faith in your use of metaphor, and you're able to bring together the things we know and wisdom and create this way forward. And I love that. And we need a lot more people like that right now.
Multiply, scale, multiply, more people, get in there. It's amazing and beautiful. The world is good. I swear to goodness.
It's good.
It's good.
We are good for the world. We can be good for the world. We gotta tell the stories.
Yes.
Gotta tell the stories.
Yes. I will save my story about how humans are just bacteria and good bacteria and bad bacteria, but be good bacteria.
Be good bacteria. And we
overwhelm the bad bacteria.
Well, then I want you to promise to come back.
I will.
And we will tell that story.
Amen.
What's big for the Fab Lab coming up next?
Oh my gosh.
What's big for Miss Lindsey Murphy? What's big for the Fab Lab?
Sister, what's big is we're working with Omsi this year. Omsi is the presenting partner of this season, which is so huge. Yeah. I'm very excited by everything that's going on. It's crazy because I've been doing this for 12 years. 12 years. For 7 years, it was just a hobby. And, here we are 5 years on the other side of it. And it's working with the largest science museum in the Pacific Northwest. So it's just,
amazing.
It is crazy. One of the things that I love about the Fab Lab is we completely continue the tradition of publicly funded community programming, educational community programming, much like PBS or OPB when we were kids. That whole Mr. Rogers vibe. Funny enough, okay, I'm making the connection. But the Marie Lanfram Foundation has provided a generous budget for us to produce the show. So much like, Boeing would have been responsible for Mr. Rogers being funded, Omsi is responsible for our funding by way of an amazing grant from the Marie Lanfram Foundation. So we have a studio, we're doing curriculum this year, and the grant partnership coming through via Omsi is making it all possible. So we're a real business and not a little engine that can anymore.
Oh. So for the kids out there,
I have like an 8-person team.
Oh,
and a production company.
Heck,
it's crazy.
Yeah. Yes.
It's not just me in my bed trying to figure out how to edit videos with Peter McKinnon
That's
anymore.
because you're unreasonable. Where do kids who want to tune in and have fun and learn so much with you, where do they find the Fab Lab?
Thefablab.com will take you absolutely everywhere, and we're youtube.com/thefablabhq.
Thank you for being someone fun to play with and learn from. I'm just so happy and overjoyed that you said yes at this invite. Thanks for sharing some time this afternoon with me.
Thanks for asking.
Next time, I'm joined by Modernist Financial founder Georgia Lee Hussey, who, like me, is an artist that transitioned into the business space. We discuss her journey, owning your wealth and success, shame and addiction around money, and so much more. It's going to be an intriguing conversation that you won't want to miss. If the Joypunk podcast is something you've been enjoying, I have a small favor to ask. Doing any one or all of these would be incredibly helpful for the show. 1, like, subscribe, or follow the show wherever it is that you listen. In most cases, to do this, you'll be looking for a follow, subscribe, or plus button on whatever platform you listen. 2, please share the show with someone you think might enjoy it. 3, rate and review on Apple Podcasts. Lastly, I'd like to give a special shout out to our listeners in the UK, Ireland, and Singapore. I see you, and I appreciate you listening. The show's only been going for a few months, but it's incredible to know we have folks listening around the world. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time. Enjoy and gratitude, Jenelle.